Okay, I guess we will get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Hamid Khan. I am with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, and welcome to our Surveillance 101 teach-in. This is part three of our Surveillance 101 teach-in. Um, we have been having these webinars on a regular basis, besides these Surveillance 101s, which are every second and fourth Thursday of the month. We hold a webinar every Tuesday as well at 6 p.m., dealing with different issues, particularly around the expansion of the police state and the war on youth, or data-driven policing, or our data bodies as to how data gets collected. And we've, to date, since we started those webinars in lieu of our in-person meeting, which was every Tuesday as well in Skid Row. And because of COVID-19, we moved this to these online webinars. We've had 21 of those, and they're all on the website, all the webinars, stoplapdspying.org. These also are going to be posted on the website as well, Surveillance 101s. So today, what we'll do is, as a part of part three, we have been discussing local law enforcement surveillance around the Los Angeles Police Department. And today we'll take it up a little bit to the next notch, and we want to make it as a layered collective learning process. But before I get into that, folks chimed in and they saw they were muted. And I'm happy to unmute all because we're a small group, but if you all can, just you'll have to unmute yourself. But in case if there is background noise, we'll appreciate it if you can keep yourself muted, because we've had our little bit of our own experience with Zoom bombing on a couple of our webinars, and for the chat as well. So the chat is only going to the host. So if you have any messages, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. That's that icon over here as well, and also ask any questions. Or if people are going to be joining on later on the phone, we'll pass on our phone number as well for them to text us or anything. Just as a way to get started, maybe it's a small group. We'll just in your own region, or whether you're local in Los Angeles or other places, we approach surveillance through this broader lens of surveillance, spying, and infiltration. Also speak about it in the context of history, that what is happening, it's not now, it's been going on forever. So what I'll do is maybe just go through real quickly the PowerPoint that we used for our Surveillance 101, and then move into the, let's get it started. So in the previous two teach-ins, we covered surveillance, baseline surveillance on a local level. And we always start off by looking at that, what is the intellectual framework that guides a lot of these programs? What is the role of the academy, and how culturally and socially how these narratives are created? So this is something from a book called The Unheavenly Cities by Edward Manfield, who basically was an advisor to Nixon and Ford and Reagan, and during the time when the war on gang and the war on drugs and when the crime was just absolutely out of control. And really the essence of his scholarship is that, that nobody is equal. That's a false notion. We have to acknowledge that there are natural divisions. So social Darwinism is at play very much. We should repeal the minimum wage, and the state should give birth control guidance to incompetent poor, and the state should be free to crack down on young lower class men. So now we're looking at the time when and then we, of course, we see the history of mass incarceration. And the way the coalition approaches surveillance is not through a lens of invasion of privacy, because that, from our vantage point, is a very sort of a privileged space, but really looking at it that how in a white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal, settler colonial system, police is the knife to enforce white supremacy. And surveillance becomes the tip of the knife, and in essence, how information is gathered and people are monitored and tracked, and how then race and poverty and suspect bodies are basically traced and tracked and monitored through the white gaze, and how people are kept in line, how people are contained and controlled and criminalized. Some of our guiding values shared one of those, not a moment in time, but a continuation of history. There's always an enemy that is created. Our goal is to really desensationalize the rhetoric of national security. And then our fight is anchored in human rights, not limited to constitutional or civil liberties or civil rights. Just a quick snapshot of the history of surveillance. Started going back to lantern laws. I want to honor Professor Simone Brown's work over here, whose book was a guide for us. She had written this book called Dark Matters about the history of surveillance during slavery, and goes back to the lantern laws, basically, which were laws in New York City in the early 1700s, where a person, if you were an enslaved body, you had to, and you were walking without a master, you had to walk with a lantern to self-identify yourself as a threat to the system or the other. And then, of course, slave patrols, black codes, Jim Crow, Red Squads, and we'll talk more about it, and then on and on and on and on. The rest, we know that how things have moved. But it's interesting that when you look at the current reform movement that is going on, there's a whole lot of stuff that is being reconfigured and kind of thrown into a milkshaker and coming back. But now it's the veneer of science. It's a pseudoscience. It's the language of algorithm. It's a language of risk assessment. It's a language of predictive analytics. And if folks can...
your table over there, Kamari. Your table doesn't need to stay. Can you move it back? Where is that? Your table belongs back over there by the chair.
And folks, if you want to, can you mute yourself if there's background noise, please? Thank you. So one of the things we look at is intelligence-led policing. This is a practice and a tactic that comes from England, from the Kent Constabulary, was adopted by the United States. And really was one of the earlier days, about 30, 35 years ago, which we saw then Bill Bratton, the NYPD chief, started developing CompStat model of policing. But behavior became very central to this type of policing, and how people's behavior was being observed. And the claim was that, you know, we can preempt crime, and this is preemptive policing, where we can monitor people's behavior and make an assessment and foresee what they're going to be doing. So gathering information, looking at people's behaviors, and this, that, and the other. This was, and we went through this in details. This is also on our website too. This is what we mapped the LAPD's architecture of surveillance, various programs for intelligence gathering, human-based and electronic-based programs as well. These are various things that, and this is, of course, we'll continue to find out what the LAPD, so we've been focusing on the Los Angeles Police Department on that. SAR program, which is the National Suspicious Activity Reporting Program, became one of the primary sort of a foundation for where we are today. This was on the heels of the Intelligence Reform Terrorism Prevention Act. But what was interesting was, going back to the intelligence-led policing, is the definition of suspicious activity. And we've ran it by scholars and people who've done the work and lawyers and all of that. But it's interesting that when you look at it, this is where, so suspicious activity is defined as observed behavior reasonably indicative of pre-operational planning related to terrorism or other criminal activity, which basically comes down to that it's all speculative and hunch-based policing. So that you're observing somebody, and which reasonably indicates, so there's no standards of typically probable cause or reasonable suspicion, but now we have gone from the age of articulable fact to articulable concern. So now giving rise to speculation and legitimizing nothing new, broken taillight or driving while black was always predictive policing, but now sort of codifying it more and more into these standards. This is basically what started off as Special Order 11, and these are the behaviors which are considered suspicious. Taking pictures, making videos, using binoculars, drawing diagrams, which would be like an everyday, regular, all day, just fully constitutionally protected activities, but they are suspicious activities. And then when the Government Accountability Office did a report back in 2012, by that time they had found that over 14,200 local law enforcement agencies had the capability to file SARs. Every federal agency was a part of that. And then almost 300,000 out of the 800,000 folks had been trained and sort of like become a part of this program. Then the intelligence gathering guidelines, which each local in their own municipalities, they may have that. These were approved in 2012, where the LAPD can place an informant at an organization based on a tip. There's no reasonable suspicion needed. They can also go into their social media and take on fictitious personas for online investigation. These are just some photos of their surveillance equipment. This is a digital receiver technology. It basically is a more powerful than Stingray. Stingray is, a lot of people are familiar with Stingray. And it's also interesting that everything that I've been talking about right now was really developed on the battlefronts by the military, by US Navy and US Marine Corps. This is Trapwire technology. Basically, especially at night through thermal imaging, it picks up people's body images and then just uploads them into various databases. High definition cameras used quite effectively. The helicopters have very, very high definition, like I don't know how many thousand pixel and all of that it does. And license plate reader has about 1,000 hits a minute. Is used quite a bit, both now by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement and local law enforcement agencies and federal agencies as well. Drones. This is a picture of an LAPD drone that we were able to keep grounded for 3.5 years, and then they had to destroy these drones. This is a Dragonflyer X6 that the Seattle PD gave it to LAPD. These are body cameras, and in full disclosure, we had written a detailed report, and I'm honored to share that one of the authors, the main authors of the report, Nick Walrath, is on this webinar as well. So thank you, Nick, for your contribution. That was a brilliantly written report. And the basic premise was that it is going to expand surveillance 24/7. Yes, the idea of officer misconduct, we always talk about it, but this is really on the heels of what was going on in Ferguson and all of that. Basically, the desperation that community is in for reform and for changes, this is sort of like a giveaway. But in essence, over the long term, it was an insidious move on part of law enforcement because in essence, it legitimizes their killing even more. It further creates justification. So there have been several other studies that have come out. This is a freedom on the move. This thing moves like a submarine scope. And during now George Floyd, uprisings as well. We saw these in Long Beach, and these basically are used for facial recognition, biometrics, and grabbing people's information. And this is what we took a photo of this during one of the May Day marches in Los Angeles. And this is used quite a bit in Iraq and Afghanistan as well. But here, what we also want to lift is that while that architecture of surveillance is there, we don't limit our research, our organizing, our popular education, our outreach onto law enforcement. We look at it that how a body is being policed every step of the way. So while the law enforcement agencies are surveilling, this is like what the DMV does, that how DMV is a part of massive information sharing. So when you go into the DMV, a lot of this information gets shared as a result. Here's the HUD, that how information is shared between various departments as well. So they become a conduit for major information gathering. This is Health and Human Services. And why this becomes even more crucial now is that with the contact tracing and syndromic surveillance and sentinel surveillance, as we are on this roadmap to recovery, what would it look like in this context? So now this is something that we've been working on, looking at how public sector and private sector exchanges information, how information moves from one system to another. And that's why we broke down DMV and some other things as well. So think of this as a as not just as a static Venn diagram, but how various other that they are constantly intersecting and how information moves, and this becomes even more crucial as we move into this roadmap to recovery. And of course, fusion centers, which we'll talk about in more detail in a minute, are central to this. A lot of information moves through here, amongst here. NCTC is the National Counterterrorism Center, which was the mainstay of the Department of Homeland Security. That also works with foreign governments as well, and through the NSA. So of course, it's not just on a local level, it's local, regional, national, and international. So I'm going to take a pause for a second and see if folks have any questions or any comments. Feel free to unmute yourself, and if you have any comment or questions, please go ahead. Okay, I must be doing really well. So now going into fusion centers, let's do a little bit of a deeper dive into the fusion centers. So fusion centers are, as it says, are these, and they're in essence, they are these warehouses of information gathering and storing and sharing. These are central, one can say, spy centers, mega spy centers, which have multiple databases where all our information is constantly moving. All our information is moving from one agency to another, from a local level, international level. There's about 85 of those around the country. Each state has them. We'll go through some of that as well, that where you can find that information for your state too. But there are two types of fusion centers. There's a primary one, which provides information sharing and analysis for the whole entire state, and then there's a recognized one which provides information to an urban center. This is just what they do. They are basically about the reports are shared with about 18,000 agencies. And when the Government Accountability Office did a report on the fusion centers as well, and we'll share some of the things that a U.S. Senate study had come out as well. It was extremely critical of the intelligence gathering that has been going on in these fusion centers. Here's just a list of different spots. Here are the fusion centers that are in California. There are 6 fusion centers. Our local one is right here in Norwalk, and we've been able to have some actions over there. We had an action back in 2012, and then another one in April of 2014, and we're able to put that in a lockdown. So these are just the state of California where a lot of these are located. I'm going to just stop here for a second and then move into a couple of other things that and talk about like what our local Los Angeles Fusion Center does. So this is let me open it up. So this is our local JIRIC, Joint Intelligence Regional Center. It is based out of Norwalk, and it's co-located with this whole security office. And basically it does a whole lot of different things, but this is also very interesting, the terrorism liaison officer, that you can actually be a part of the Department of Homeland Security intelligence system and go for training, and the FBI will train you to become a TLO, a terrorism liaison officer. And they have these regular trainings. I mean, they have a whole bunch of upcoming trainings over here. So in essence, just we have to really understand that, I mean, I don't know who would want to be a TLO, but I'm sure there's people who are super interested in being these TLOs, and that's why they continue with this program. And there's a whole lot of information that is available over here. This is also something that the policing violent extremism has also become a major issue over here, because that is directly targeting the youth. There are various programs that they're going, and yes, they say ISIS and ISIL, but it's really through the Preventing Violent Extremism, which is in high schools and middle schools and from K through 12. That's how youth are being absolutely being also targeted as well. And and looking at this updated course as well. The next one is on August 25th, and it's a certification. You get a CEU credit. I don't know what a CEU credit is, but if you go through a terrorism liaison officer program, this is what you would be doing. Here is another. Can you see this page which says Alabama, Alaska? Okay, so here's just going on the Homeland Security's website. You can also, which is like dhsgov.gov/fusion centers. So you can always look up as to where you are. So for example, let's say if you're in Kansas, then Kansas Intelligence Fusion Center is right there. This is their phone number, and you can all just figure out where this place is. If you open it up, this would also clearly give you all the indication as where your local information is. And this happens to be in Topeka, Kansas, which is, I believe, the capital of Kansas as well, of the state. So you can obviously go in and identify where these things are. Let's say any other state. Let's look at Illinois. If you want to look where the fusion centers are over here. There's one in Chicago. There was another one too. So then you can always go into their crime prevention and information center and do that. Now, why I'm kind of going through this exercise in identifying this is that what's really interesting about this whole piece is that these are, while controlled by the state, they're run by the FBI, and about 80% of their budget, comes from local and state municipalities. So right now, as we are talking about defunding of the police, we also have to look at it that how much money is going into policing, and these are some of the nuances that we continue to miss when we are speaking about that. Then what would that defunding really look like, right? So this is also, and so that's where, in a sense, we have to constantly be reminding ourselves that what exactly is that we are trying to do here. This was just this latest update. This was a 2017 summary of the national the fusion centers, and here's something that if you look at the bottom, if you look at the budget, the way they have increased, it's really, and so now let's say for 2017 the total cost was close to, so now the federal government is paying $44 million, and then the federal grants are paying $63 million, but then local municipalities are paying $89 million, and the states are paying $120 million. So about $209 million. So so 2017 overall expenditure on fusion centers is about $330 million in 2017. But out of that, just about $100 million is going from the federal government, but about the rest of it, 66 to 70%, is coming from local, state, and federal agency. I mean, local, state, and local communities. So let's see exactly what the fusion centers have done, and whether their claim to prevent terrorism, whether their claim to really be a repository of intelligence gathering. I want to take you to a U.S. Senate report that had come out in 2012, 2013, and this was a permanent subcommittee on investigation, committee on Homeland Security. This was run by Carl Levin, who was a senator from Michigan, who was the chair, and Tom Coburn, who was a senator from Oklahoma. And they basically commissioned a study to look into the fusion centers and see, like, okay, we're giving a whole bunch of money where is all this money going and what is going on. And we don't have to go very far. And this is also on our website, so feel free. So even when you look at the table of contents, this is what's been going on. So just for a second to look at this thing, that the reporting from fusion centers was often flawed, unrelated to terrorism, nothing of value, and if some of these reports had been published, they could have had violated the Privacy Act, right? Terrorism-related reporting was often outdated, duplicative, and uninformative. So here we have over $330 million going into these places. DHS intelligence reporting officials who reportedly violated guidelines face no sanctions. Okay, now these are folks who are really who can make and break things for people, like false positives and things like that, where people and somebody is claimed or is to be a terrorist, somebody's claimed to be a drug smuggler, somebody's claimed to be that. But this is where and short reliance on underqualified, underperforming contract employers to different chain of commands, on and on and on and on and on. So this was such a major indictment. So now retaining inappropriate records, they were obviously obtaining they can't adequately oversee the financial support, and other things as well. Fusion centers have been unable to meaningfully contribute to federal counterterrorism efforts, but they are now being pushed and touted as a major piece as to where they're going, right? So so this is a pretty, even with the reports that they had, like there's supposedly in quotes these success stories, which we always hear these names: Najibullah Zazi, Faisal Shahzad, this, that, and the other. And these are just in quotes success stories, do not demonstrate centers' values to counterterrorism efforts. So in a sense, and then they say that fusion centers may have even hindered and not aided federal counterterrorism efforts. So this is basically, we wanted to share with you that while there's a lot of hoopla about federal agencies, there's a lot of this sensationalism and this certain sort of, I don't know, sexiness that is created about these federal robocops. But when you cut through a lot of BS, I mean, it's basically just incompetent, just downright incompetent, downright corrupt, downright violating everything else, and downright just business as usual. But what was interesting was that when we confronted the LAPD's head of counterterrorism, and this is a whole report that folks can look at and at your own time as well, and this is just a list of where the monies went. So they were buying dozens of flat screen TVs. They were buying SUVs for the local agencies from the money that was going on. Then they were also getting shirt button cameras. So the boys with toys were getting this cheap thrill about like this candy store of goods that they had, and they were spending revenues on this kind of stuff. So in essence, when we confronted local authorities about this, the response from the head of counterterrorism at LAPD, Mike Downing, at the time was that there's a lot of white noise, but an occasional gold nugget. So now when you break it down, that an occasional gold nugget, that they're absolutely, they are totally fine with a needle in a haystack. And even this report goes into details that how there was so much bogus information that it would just clog up information upload. And they have like tons and tons of information. And what's even more messed up is that through the suspicious activity reports, where they do this vetting and they talk about it as to where and how and what is going on, and even if they cannot find any nexus to anybody for any terrorism or criminal activity, the federal government and the fusion centers can still keep our records for 30 years. So if my file goes in, which of course with a name like Hamid Hussain Khan, and of course there's a huge FBI file, but yet at the same time, if they can't find anything, they will still keep my information. Next information goes in, they're going to keep it for 30 years. So that's how, we wanted to talk about it, like what exactly is going on when we look at these things. Here's another list of a bunch of fusion centers that one can one can find out in their own state, and then just where we are. So we just talking about that. What we did was that we were like able to get like through a sheriff's department like some information into like, okay, we'll share some of this information, and I'll just show you something over here real quickly. Let's see what that is. Yeah. So we were able to get, these are supposedly secret files that go into fusion centers, right? So we were able to get just this information, about 1,800 of these suspicious activity reports, which were filed by various agencies. This particular was the Sheriff's Department, where how they go in. So in this one, this says subject was observed taking photos of the Wilmington Green Line station. He was warned to stop and he refused. Well, I mean, it's his right. It's a constitutional right. He then took photos of the rail line extending from a location to downtown Los Angeles. His camera was taken in order to power it down. So now you are taking a photograph, but it's a suspicious activity. And then he, the cops come, harass him, tell him to take this information. And then, of course, he had taken multiple blue line now weather, and there are stories of that. So, for example, there was a story of a New York subway worker who, so the New York metro system had a photography competition. So they put it out there that, okay, we would not give people a 1 year's of free pass or whatever it was, that take photographs of our metros and the underground rail. Right? So for the subway system. One of the New York Metro employee himself was at the station, and he said, okay, I'll be in the competition too, and he was taking photographs. Well, next thing you know, all those photographs are destroyed. He's apprehended because supposedly he's in a suspicious activity, and basically he can't even be a part of any of these activities. So some of the examples I'll show you is like this was So this is a report on Tips and Lead that 4 adult females were taking pictures of the east side, of course it was redacted, and who spoke with me. They told me they were students from Brentwood Art School in the city of Santa Monica, and they were taking pictures as a part of their social assignment, a school assignment. So now, in essence, what happens? So they are on their field trip, they are taking photographs, they get stopped because it's considered a suspicious activity, and they ended up going into the fusion centers. So that's the kind of stuff that basically happens when they try and do all of this thing. I also had something else as well. Here's another one. Let me just see. I hope I didn't mess it up. When I did that, were you able to see it? Oh, okay, never mind. Because I don't know why you get to the arrow when it goes there. It removes everybody else from there. Here's another piece of somebody taking a photograph, just as a way that, and again, being harassed and the information. And then this person's information goes to the Joint Terrorism Task Force. So now a secret file gets opened on this person because they are now so this is what the fusion centers do. I'm going to also then go back and share with you another report as well and now we're going to go into some task forces and federal government and things like that. This was a report that was published by again one of the U.S. senator, and wanted to, and of course, like, none of them are my favorite folks or anything, but in a sense, like what exactly, where is the money's going around Homeland Security? In 2012, although it's 10 years ago or 8 years ago, but it's a critical time period because it's sort of like almost fresh. So we've had almost over 10 years of 9/11. We've had the massive expansion of the National Security Police State. We've had the creation of one of the largest federal agencies, the Department of Homeland Security. Which has the largest number of employees of any federal agency. And we have all of these folks who are now a part of this thing. So then the thing was that let's pause over here for a second and see where our monies are going. So this report, this was done on the Urban Area Security Initiative, which is basically a part of Department of Homeland Security's grant program, and the grants are given through FEMA, and the Urban Area Security Initiative it gives monies directly to police departments. Okay.
Amit, we're still on the screen that shows the states in the Fusion Center tab. We can't see what you're talking about.
What? Oh, I thought, my bad. Shit. Sorry.
It's okay.
Hold on, I'll fix it. Give me 1 second. This one? Jeez. Thanks, Amanda. I appreciate it. Was it this one? Amanda, are you there?
There we go. No, we were still on the internet screen, so now we're back to the slideshow. Now we can see it.
Right. No, but could you see the other stuff that I've been talking about?
No, Nick and I were texting. We could only see the website for the Fusion Center. That's where we were stuck.
Oh shit. Okay, never mind. All right. Okay. So maybe I just my bad. My apologies, folks. I moved too fast. So let me just go to, because I thought you could screen share and do the same thing. So I goofed up. So let me just go back to it. Okay. So we did this. We did this. Let me just go to this. Hold on a second. So were you able to see this, the U.S. Senate report? Okay. All right. Well, let me go back. So this is what I was talking about. I don't know if you heard me speak. This is back in 2012 when the U.S. Senate, Carl Levin and Coburn, released this assessment of the Fusion Center, and that's what I was alluding to. That if you just look at the table of content, it basically tells you exactly what's going on. Now, this is a federal agency. This is like touted as the premier agency for intelligence gathering for terrorism prevention. This is now 10 years or 11 years after 9/11, with the massive expansion of the police state. Fusion centers being central. It took 2 laws after they passed. Homeland Security Act, which established the Department of Homeland Security in 2002. And then in 2004, the Terrorism Intelligence Reform Terrorism Prevention Act that established all of these things. And this is what they had to offer when the U.S. Senate basically did its audit of their money. And their interest was, where is our money going? And this is what we saw, that Fusion Center's reporting was flawed, unrelated to terrorism, had nothing of value. They could have violated Privacy Act protection, was duplicative, outdated, duplicative, uninformative, just completely as how these things were playing out. The DHS does not even know how much it's spent on Fusion Centers, doesn't exercise oversight of grant funds or anything like that. And this is where their monies are being used to buy Chevy Tahoes and then various other things. I mean, they've been unable to meaningfully contribute to federal counterterrorism efforts. Now, this is an official U.S. Senate document, basically a self-indictment of its own incompetency and corruption, right? And they even point, the Fusion Centers do not prioritize counterterrorism efforts. They even pointed to, in quotes, that the success stories that they tout about these cases have no demonstrated value to counterterrorism, and on and on and on. And then they say that they may have even hindered and not aided federal counterterrorism efforts. So this is basically where the report that I was pointing to and talking about, that how this information, that where the monies are going, and how just like, and this is where we're talking about dozens of flat screen TVs, buying SUVs, getting like these toys for themselves around, cell phone tracking and this, that, and the other. So this is what the story about the Fusion Center is. Want to just, so the last piece I was, before, thank you, Amanda, for doing that. For reminding me that it wasn't showing up. This is the report that where I was at, which is, again, another US Senate report, Safety at Any Price, which was commissioned by Tom Coburn, who was a Republican senator out of Oklahoma, about where the money was going. And this is what I was talking about earlier, that we are in December 2012 when this is released, 11 years out of 9/11. And they looked at this special money that Homeland Security had allocated, which is emergency preparedness, which goes to several municipalities, in which between 2003 and 2012, about $35 billion had been given, and within that was a stream of urban area security initiative where these monies go. So let's look at that, what that is all about. So this is also on our website, but I just wanted to point, and this is also the $35 billion that has been given to these various municipalities. So this was a breakdown, at least at that point, of where the money was going through the various urban areas. So LA, Long Beach, up until 2012, and that was 8 years ago, had received $643 million. And Bay Area had received $350 million. When you look at New York, just New York City had received $1.4 billion already, right? So now, I mean, just when folks are out on the street, when folks are speaking about defunding the police, when folks are talking about abolition of the police, it's not just the money that is coming from the city budgets. It's the hundreds and millions of dollars that is coming from these federal grants as well. And so where was this money? How were they getting this money, right? So this is about emergency preparedness and all of that. But this is how this was politics of risk. It was a very critical report, really highlighted that this has to stop. And here's something where police departments were commissioning or retaining or contracting grant writers. So here the grant writers tell them what they want to hear, and you stand a chance of getting a better score. Fear has always been a motivating factor in getting the government to spend its money. Now, this is an introduction to grants, lawofficer.com. So now when you look at this thing, this is exactly where now these grant consultants are telling folks that create as much fear as possible, because that sells, and you're going to be able to get that money. And now let's go to how some of that money was being spent. So, just so here is, let me get to that page. Okay, so interesting thing happens. These grants used for a wide variety of allowable expenses. So here's what is going on. Halo is a securities company. They organized a counter-terrorism summit in 2012, and which was held at the Paradise Point Resort and Spa on an island out of San Diego. And the 5-day summit was deemed an allowable expense by DHS, permitting first responders, which could be fire, cops, these folks as well, to use grant funds for $1,000 entrance fee. Right? And it had this luxury resort, features 460 guest rooms, 5 pools, 3 fantastic restaurants, world-class spa, blah, 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 and paradise awaits. Now, when I was reading this report, I was also kind of pleasantly surprised that the US Senate, taking such a critical view of its own fuck-ups and its own things, was sort of like interesting to see. And this is where the money was being spent. That they were spending money, they hired people for them to be trained in a zombie apocalypse. So these are actual photos where actors had dressed up as zombies, right? They had dressed up as zombies, and then the officers were being trained that how are you going to fight back a zombie apocalypse? So again, when we talk about these programs, when we look at some of these things, it is very instructive for us to all remember that, you know, how these things move and what is really going on over here. I just wanted to quickly show you some documentation on a local level. So this is a memorandum of understanding between the fusion centers and local law enforcement agencies. So this is who is basically a part and parcel of that, besides Homeland Security and various other agencies as well. So this was something that we got through public records. It's now easily available as well. So this goes back to you know, just several years ago, back in 2000, whenever this thing was going on, and that's what it was used. Now I just want to quickly move into that. What exactly is, you know, the critique that has been coming from state and federal agencies as well. This was a study, and remember suspicious activity reporting that we talked about earlier. This was a study that was done by the National Academy of Sciences. And of course, you know, I mean, for us at the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, we really don't give much credence to them at all. I'm just bringing them here because from our vantage point, our community's stories is our truth, what is happening to the community. So we don't depend upon these things, but I think sometimes to drive a point home where it's like, well, gee, you know, maybe not. Okay, well, let's see what our own folks or these folks are saying themselves. So they look, and remember we talked about data mining and behavioral surveillance. So this is what they had to say about data mining and behavioral surveillance. That regarding data mining, the book concludes that although these methods have been useful in the private sector for spotting consumer fraud, they are less helpful for counterterrorism because so little is known about what patterns indicate terrorist activity. Regarding behavioral surveillance in the counterterrorism context, the book concludes that although research and development on certain aspects of this topic is warranted, there is no scientific consensus on whether these techniques are ready for operational use at all in counterterrorism. So this is now the National Academy of Sciences is coming back with a clear understanding and a clear message that, you know, everything that is being stated is bullshit. Basically, that's what it really comes down to. That's what they're saying. That is what really it comes down to. But this is also the time that, and I would suggest folks, and I think 2010, 2011 was an interesting year because 10 years had passed. So a lot of groups were getting a part of that. And as we talk about the growth and the expansion of the national security police state, this is now 10 years ago. This is even something as a right-wing newspaper like Washington Post did its own research. And if you can access Washington Post, I don't have subscription to that, you can actually go to moving maps and it'll show you that now this is by this time, the investigations found that 1,271 government organizations and 1,931 companies were already part of counterterrorism, homeland security, and intelligence in about 10,000 locations across the United States. Now, this is something that the Washington Post found 10 years ago. An estimated 854,000 people, close to a million, nearly 1.5 times as many people as live in Washington, D.C., hold top security clearances. Okay. Washington and the surrounding areas, 33 building complexes for top security intelligence work are under construction or have been built since 2001. Equivalent of almost 3 Pentagons or 22 US Capitol buildings, about 17 million square feet of space. Now think about it for a second, and think about the homelessness, and think about the unhoused, the crisis that the unhoused is going. Think about that who has access to healthcare. Think about that, you know, that who our kids have even access to like this online teaching, who has computers, who has access to online teaching, who has good internet connection. But here's monies being spent where you have 17 million square feet of space, which is under construction and then you have almost 13. How many government organizations are involved in enhancing the human condition? You know, I mean, so in essence, this was a very well done, actually, and this is the link. It was a very well done report, and then they published about 50,000 intelligence reports and all of that. So that's that's the place that we are at. And before we go into the next piece of some task forces, I want to pause here again and see if folks have any comment or any questions, or any thoughts that folks may have. Anything? Nick, you've been doing some research on this as well. Do you have any comments, any thoughts?
Yeah, just one thing on, so you offered up the Senate report, basically citing fusion centers as wasteful, ineffective, just totally mishandling money and resources. Another facet to it is that the DHS's mandate for fusion centers is actually for them to compete with one another. So to compete with other fusion centers, to be innovative, to be entrepreneurial, to be competitive. So that's often, I'm not saying they're not totally dysfunctional or, to some degree, but that's also, it can be misinterpreted, this competition and this kind of mandate to compete among one another. It can be misinterpreted as, dysfunction or them not, serving their mission. Obviously they're doing something right because they're crushing Occupy, they're crushing Standing Rock, they're doing all these things with private security. They're basically a Google for cops. So, I mean, there must be a reason people are still funding them and, giving them hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's just the point, is this kind of neoliberal ethos that guides the approach that fusion centers have. And what can be thought of as as dysfunction is actually competition.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a point. Yeah.
That's definitely a good point. That's definitely a good point. Jackie, you were asking for a report. Was that the report on the fusion center? Let me just look it up again real quickly. It's the U.S. Senate report. Let me bring it back. Here's the report, and this is federal support for and involvement in state and local fusion centers. And the other report is safety at any price, which was also on the Urban Area Security Initiative and the funding of these programs. Any other comments? Any other questions? Cool. So while we are on this subject, then maybe, Nick, to your point, let's talk a little bit more about what we saw in Portland and what we've been seeing in New York, and the Customs and Border Patrol and other federal agencies as well. And now increasingly we're seeing Operation Legend that got launched by Trump. We have Operation Relentless Pursuit of these multi-agency forces that are being launched as well. And we're going to go into LA as well as to what are the various other task forces that are going in. But what was the any folks have any thought after they've been watching this thing, and to Nick's point about crushing dissent and going after folks in Standing Rock, how, any thoughts from anybody or any comments as to how are we looking at this thing? Okay, cool. Maybe we'll just move on to the task forces. So going to the talking about the task forces, let's just first of all, of course, a lot of folks have heard about the LAPD's and the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. Let me get to that real quickly. But besides that, there's numerous other task forces as well. I mean, like, so this is the FBI's Violent Gang Task Force. So this is, I mean, if you look at it, that it's all over the place. Just in California, There's so many different types of partnerships that are going on that the FBI is very much a part and parcel. And there's about 160 violent gang safe streets task forces nationwide. This is also a very large, fusion centers are also very central to this piece as well. So that's a huge task force. There's also other task forces that the FBI has, which would be where this is called. Let me open this up. This is the Safe Trails Task Force, and this is basically for, as they would call, the Indian country, investigative coordination in Indian country to target violent crime and all of that. So these are also in various other locations as well. So that's another FBI task force that, and typically we hear about the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is the most common one, but the FBI has a gazillion other task forces that you can think of. Another one that they have is, of course, this one around cybercrime and crime against children. But this is also. But I think we also have to look at these in a very critical way as well, because this task force particularly has been going after sex workers and like online sex workers and sex workers as well, and they've been passing laws and they've been kind of just framing that in the context of child trafficking and child pornography and all of that. But in essence, the bigger target has been going after sex workers in the task force thing. I was just wanted to go back to something real quick again. Let's going that. Okay. Oops. But I think when we look at these task forces, let's bring it back to LA, and let's also try and let me just, we've already seen this. Talked about the fusion centers. Okay, so now let's bring it local, because a lot of times, just when we talk about the federal agencies, but here is Citywide Nuisance Abatement Program. Now, this started in the mid '90s, and this has become a major tool for the city to displace people. This has become, and this is being deployed quite a bit in South Central Los Angeles. Typically, what they do is that they call these as nuisance properties. So maybe, let's say, somebody is living there, and somebody may be gang identified, which of course has been proven to be, a lot of that information has proven to be bogus, or somebody may be selling marijuana. So what they do is, through the city attorney's office, and this is what the task force is, that it is made up of the state of California, Los Angeles City Attorney's Office, LAPD, Department of Building and Safety, Department of Housing and Community Investment, and the Department of City Planning. It also involves County Board of Supervisors, City Council, courts, community members, and neighbors. So in a sense, what it does is that it basically just creates this whole dragnet, and it creates a whole system which leads to mass evictions of people, which leads to mass displacement of people. And I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, because we don't think about these task forces sometimes on a local level, that how many task forces and what sort of coordination is always going on. Just like Nick was talking about the role of fusion centers in Standing Rock and other places as well, that's exactly how this multi-agency coordinated effort happens locally over here. I mean, these are various other things that they all work together. There are several memorandums of understanding. There are several memorandums of agreements that local law enforcement agencies work out with each other. I just wanted to share some of the reports that we have released and published on some of these issues. This was our audit of the suspicious activity reporting program. This goes into details around the fusion centers and around some of these programs. This is the report that I was talking about that Nick had authored on body cameras. This was back about 6 years ago that we had released. This was a report on the drones that we had released back in 2015. They're all on the website. This is a report on predictive policing that was released in 2018. And I wanted to bring this to people's attention as well, that increasingly when we talk about task forces, we also have to look at how technology is being deployed and how social network analysis is very much a part and parcel, that how people are being traced and tracked and monitored, and how people are being identified as well, and how they are going into various databases, and how their information is constantly being uploaded into these various databases. These are just our demands. I mean, basically, as abolitionists, our goal is to completely abolish this system. This is our team back in May Day 2014. And gosh, it takes back several years, about 6 years ago. Jamie and Emilio and Esteban and Sean and several other people, Dogon and everybody else. This was our team that did that May Day Watch the Watchers in 2014. So just wanted to share that. This is a picture outside the Fusion Center when we put it in a lockdown in 2014. This was in Norwalk when we were there, and basically put it in a shutdown. This is when we were fighting against the drones, and this is the mayor's house, and we went quote unquote Christmas caroling. So when we were there, there was a whole lot of people. And this is how there was a theater. We did street theater against the drones. The LAPD showed up in riot gear. And then they told us to leave. But then we said, was there any law against Christmas caroling? They said no. So we just went for a walk in the neighborhood. And we went to all the neighbors, the mayor's neighbors. And then we did this caroling around flying through the sky, a brand new dragonfly, so the name of the drone. And then people would come out of their homes. So also, I just wanted to share some organizing tactics that we were using. This is our very first press conference out in 2012 at the outside the LAPD headquarters. So this goes back when we had filed for a public records, so just wanted to share some of this information way back when. So that's basically. I had some other stuff too, but so I showed you some of these things, some of these photos, but let me just show a couple more to you. This was the scene, which was really interesting. That this was, as they would say, storming the buildings. So this is the Fusion Center. This is in Norwalk. This is in that 2013 or something. We had surrounded the building. We were pounding on the doors, on their glass doors and glass windows, and you had these federal agents from the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the DA's office, LAPD personnel, Sheriff's Department, and it was just an intense moment. That as people had literally stormed the building, they put it in a complete lockdown, and then had all of us surrounded by the sheriffs as well. But anyway, so I want to just maybe stop there again and see if folks have any comments. And thank you, Amanda. Yes, we've been hanging around for so long, so it's been a minute. So any comments, any thoughts with that, and anything that comes to mind? Yes, go ahead, Nick. You may want to unmute yourself.
There we go. So Hamid, I'd interviewed this professor, Brendan McQuaid, last year. He studies fusion centers. He actually went into fusion center in New Jersey, the Joint Regional, I think, Operations Center, the JROC is what they call it. Anyways, in the interview, one of the things he mentioned is that no two fusion centers are alike. So that really each has its own kind of focus and mandate based on, you know, the political context or whatever. And there's even a saying like, once you've seen a fusion center, you've seen a fusion center. That's their kind of motto or whatever. In the context of LA, what do you think they're honing in on if this is the case, that each has its own mandate or its own focus?
A lot of stuff in LA is around this sort of claim of transnational gang activity. You know, just so LA has been very big in that. The other piece is the DEA task forces and kind of just in a sense of drugs, drug smuggling as well. So that's one piece. But the other piece is really the political activity and a lot of other things that are going on. Suspicious activity reporting program, uploading a lot of this information. So now I think especially we will have to, but we just filed a pretty detailed public records request with the LAPD around George Floyd uprisings policing from May 24th onwards, and really kind of just looking at this as to where and how and what is the role of the fusion center. So we've been asking, you know, just all details and communication. I think LA is getting big into the contact tracing piece. Because that's one of their stated sort of goal is as well for disasters and pandemics. So because FEMA is the central sort of funding agency as well, that the DHS funnels money through FEMA. So I think contact tracing and all the information around syndromic surveillance and sentinel surveillance and various other types of surveillances that are happening are going to be routed through these fusion centers. So I think, I mean, among other things, there's a whole lot of activity going on as we can see it. And of course, LA is, you're looking at a very large area. So they have access to information from just in LA County, you have 46 independent police departments and then the sheriff's department. And then when you add highway patrol and then you had the DA and the adjudication branch, and the investigative branches and various other branches, there's a whole lot of information that goes through fusion centers. Any other question or any comments? So the question is that how do we hold them accountable? How do we hold fusion centers accountable? Thank you for the question, Ocean. I mean, I think for us, it's obviously, you know, as organizers, these are things that, number one, our goal always is to expose them, always. So one of the things, for example, on one of those actions photos that you saw, what we did was that Norwalk is a suburb of LA, of East LA County. So, and this fusion center is located in a county complex where you have the courthouse, the Social Security office, and various other things. So what we did was we went into the local neighborhoods, and I'm honored to also share that with my sister Chella, who was myself and Chella and some of the folks literally just went door knocking in the local neighborhood. And what we were able to do was to talk to people in the local neighborhoods about the presence of the fusion centers. Chella, I don't know if you want to make any comment about that or not, because we were both, you and I actually were in that team that we were door knocking. But that was one of the ways that what we did was that we created printed material. We created certain other things, and we were passing out these flyers. We invited those residents to come out to the action as well. So, Chella, any thoughts on your end?
No, but yeah, just remembering learning about the fusion centers around that time and knowing that they, you know, that they would have stars on a bunch of folks, you know, there, and you know, suspicious activity reports. And so, yeah, thinking about like the fact that they are just not, they are not clear, and they are not healthy for our community. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Jella. And then, and then we didn't stop there. We actually brought cameras. We went inside. It was before the second action, actually. Myself and Jamie Garcia were able to get into the building. We went and went to the second floor where the Fusion Center is located. We started pounding on the door. People did come out. They didn't want to talk to us. Then this local security came. They asked us to leave, and we told them we're not going to leave because we're here to give them a FOIA. And then they called the sheriffs on us. And then the sheriffs basically, interestingly, they took our side for a second. They said, well, they're here on a business and this is a public office, and if they want to deliver a freedom of information request, then they can do that. But then they didn't accept it. So we just went back and forth. But it was, what was clear was that, just for folks to know, that's the first thing, as to where this location is and where exactly and what is going on, for the neighbors to know and the local community to know exactly what is going on. And, and so it's not just this, and I think why it's also very critical, Ocean, is that many times surveillance is still seen in this very sensationalized federal FBI COINTELPRO history, rather than bringing it home that, look, this is here, this is local, this is 24/7, this is happening all the time. So not going to say much about what we are planning and in the upcoming months, but there's definitely, there's going to be fusion centers are on the radar. I believe that the people are looking to revisit the fusion centers. So hopefully, just keep an eye out, and we'll be putting out a mass call to action, or hopefully maybe just do it, because the second action we did was turned into a national day of action. So we were able to hit fusion centers in about 7 different cities or 8 different cities. It was a coordinated action between Boston and Oakland and LA and in Memphis and some other places as well. Yes, Juicy. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Like anything, when people think of this fusion center and the spying piece and the repository of all our information, what comes to mind? I mean, how would you, and I think for me, the question is that we're always sometimes people told, and quite frankly, people who have the privilege of race and institution and class, we're always told, like, I have nothing to hide. So with that stalker state in mind and fusion center in mind, I'll be very interested to hear what somebody else's response would be on this webinar, as to when somebody says, I have nothing to hide, how would you respond to that? Anybody? Come on now, you all are here, so fighting the national security police state. Can't stay silent. I'm going to unmute all if you don't say anything.
They are lying.
I ain't got nothing to hide.
Huh?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Chella.
I just said, I know that they are lying and that they're not being clear, like I said. That they do have something to hide. Because I don't have to keep walking around saying I'm a Black person. It's obvious, right? Like, so it's obvious that they don't, if they do have to keep on saying we are not hiding something, that they are hiding something. Muting.
Stephen, do you have a comment? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I believe I did. I might suggest it's the wrong frame. It's not about me wanting to hide anything. You don't need to know. So, yeah, it's the wrong question even. And from white privilege, yeah, no, you don't even. Why would you even want to know? It's not your business.
Mm-hmm.
My house, you know, yeah, so there you are. That's it.
Okay. All right. Amanda, did you want to make that comment?
Sure, I can. I do hear this quite a bit, just because I'm a grad student and I'm dealing with a lot of white privilege of other grad students. It's not necessarily whether or not you have something to hide, it's that they can easily manufacture something if they have access to your data. If they ever see you as a threat to the state in any way, all of a sudden there will be a case based on anything they observe, even if they mistake you. Like there's tons of records of them doing this to people when they've been invaded or setting people up. Like the FBI does it all the time to stupid kids online that don't even know that they're breaking a crime by wanting to buy something. Yeah, so it's not, it,
Definitely. So that's Ocean says exactly what you said. So yeah, definitely. Go ahead, Nick. Unmute yourself.
Just wanted to say with regards to privacy, the boundaries and limits of privacy are constantly set and reset by the state. So appealing to the state is pretty futile, and privacy is really, in that sense, about regulation. It's also a tool of pacification. So, yeah, appealing to privacy is it's a no-go. It's a dead end. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Jillian, Jackie, Tate, do you all have any thoughts, any comments on what you've heard?
Yeah, I guess when people say that they don't have anything to hide, it's more of a deflection that they don't want to think about all of the access that government bodies have, and maybe that's just they're like, oh well, they're not looking at me, but as long as they're okay, then they think that it's all fine. I don't know.
No, absolutely. Well said. Go ahead, Amanda. You had one more comment? Unmute.
there we go. Just kind of bouncing off of some of what Nick said, I almost always forget the right to privacy is like assembled from a bunch of little parts of like the first 10 amendments, and it was granted through the courts, and it only applies to people who the courts want to extend it to, and generally that's also tied to citizenship. And I don't even know what citizenship means anymore. Like we see what's going on with the uprisings and how people are getting snatched up in vans. Like they're not even pretending to like suspend people's rights and say it's like a state of emergency. They're just literally taking people off the streets, and that's nothing new depending on like what community you're from. So a lot of these rights are more like a veneer or an illusion of rights, and they're not actually granted or real. So appealing to a right that we don't have. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Tate or Jackie, any thoughts? I can unmute y'all. Okay. Cool. Well, so any last thoughts, Nick, Stephen? Do y'all have any last thoughts? We're gonna wrap this up in a couple minutes. Okay. All right, cool. Well, good. So, well, thank you all very much for dialing in, and this is some information that for us, it's really crucial that how a lot of this information needs to be decolonized, because many times, many folks in our communities are not aware of these things. We've been doing mass outreach and education for communities as well. I think as things become more and more, and we're looking at mass homelessness and mass evictions that are looking to happen, mass unemployment looking to happen, heading into some major, almost like recession, depression era economic conditions, and even worse. So of course the investments are from the government and from the state and other parts are not really into how Do we change people's conditions? It's going to be in policing. So we can see that how people are, how it's going to impact us, what is the role of the fusion centers, how that information gathering and centralizing information is going to happen, how people are going to be targeted. So I think this is very critical information that we need to sort of share with each other and decolonize and bring this knowledge down to earth. So hopefully we'll see you all more on this as well. Our next Tuesday is going to be our 22nd webinar, and that's at 6 o'clock. And on that, the plan for this webinar is again to spend time, bring back some art and culture, some music, some spoken word. But we also want to spend some time in what we are framing that as what is a win, because quite frankly, the most recent shenanigans in the city in LA about the defunding of police is just that, a whole bunch of shenanigans. So they basically reduced $150 million out of the $230 million that was going to be increased in LAPD's budget. So is that a win, right? No, absolutely not. So it is. So we're kind of just grounding this in Malcolm's, just a phrase that he always used, that you stick a knife 9 inches and you want to pull it out 3 inches, it still is in 6 inches. And then even if you pull the knife all the way out, the wound is still not healed. So I think these are all the sleight of hands, and for folks to really kind of just jump up and down, and increasingly, it's not a celebration that people are engaging in. People are realizing that this has been a major sort of a fraud that has been perpetrated, and the best reform that the city came back with was to establish a 16-member advisory committee. So they have appointed an advisory committee for the LA Police Commission to reimagine policing, right? So not only are they co-opting our language about reimagining public safety, they're reimagining. So it's the same thing what they did after the Watts uprising in the 60s. The McCone Commission came up. Same thing what they did after Rodney King. Christopher Commission was established. Same thing happened after Rampart scandal, that the DOJ had to come in. Same investigation after the 2000 May Day melee, and now again a 16-member advisory committee. So we completely reject that. So join the fight. Tuesday morning is going to be quite robust at the police commission over Zoom. We'll be sending out, over Zoom. We'll be sending this information. And then Tuesday evening, be on a lookout for a Zoom webinar on what is a win, and join us. And if you have, if you like to sing, if you like to write, if you write poetry, if you want to share that, play a musical instrument, we'd be happy to, and we'd love to, for you to participate in that as well. So with that, I want to thank you all very much. Have a wonderful evening, have a safe evening, have a healthy evening, and we look forward to seeing you out on the streets in the Zoom wonderland. Thank you very much. Adios.